needs to make the case for it and explain why it's necessary.
Seselja, should there have been a more robust explanation from Mr Hockey as to why he's making that injection, but also lifting what's going to be, a fairly healthy deficit?
Well, I think he has explained it. I think this is about being prudent. There are many challenges ahead, and if the Reserve Bank has made it clear that they need this money in the contingency, the alternative was the Labor Party who ripped money out of this contingency. So I think the incoming government is 100% right to be very cautious and very careful. In the end, this is money that the Reserve Bank hopefully won't need, but it will be there should they need it. And I think the alternative, if not enough money was in that fund, I think the coalition would rightly be criticised if they didn't take the necessary steps. So I think this is the prudent thing to do. I think this will ensure that people can have confidence, because there hasn't been a lot of confidence in the previous Labor government and their economic management. And what the Australian people need is confidence in our institutions and confidence in our government. And what Joe Hockey has done is absolutely right. It is building confidence. It is taking prudent steps to deal with foreseeable risks.
It's not about trying to, well, I suppose, take decisions like this, inflate the deficit, make the task of making the budget look better a bit easier, because that's what, down the track in those out years of the forward estimates, that's what Wayne Swan is suggesting, that this is a political motive behind this.
I don't think you'd need to inflate Labor's deficits in order to make the coalition look better. Labor delivered record deficits, the largest deficits in our history, and the coalition's job is to fix the mess that Labor left us. So I don't think that there's any attempt to try and change things. The Labor Party left us with massive deficits. Our task is to bring the budget back into surplus, but at the same time we need to work with institutions like the Reserve Bank to ensure that there's confidence in the economy.
Okay, Jim Chalmers, on the Audit Commission, it looks like, according to Phil Coorey's report in the Financial Review today, that they're looking at the tougher decisions will be taken to any subsequent election, that they might be in the budget but in the out years of the forward estimates, to enable Tony Abbott to seek a mandate. So far from bring on surprises, this is going to be done in line with what he said, no breaches of commitments.
I find it very hard to believe. You look at the terms of reference and more specifically the timing of that Commission of Audit. It's been, the first report is in January. That's obviously geared up for the first budget. The issue I have with whether it's the Commission of Audit or the RBA or whatever, is that Joe Hockey's been was Shadow Treasurer for 4 years before he became Treasurer, and he appears not to give a moment's thought to economic policy. He's contracted out to big business his Commission of Audit. He sort of has a vague sense that he wants to swing the axe at jobs and health and education, but he doesn't know how or where. And right across economic policy, he seems to be lurching from one position to another. Whether it's on the impact of international events on the budget, he's had a different view. Whether it's on the impact of or the necessity to jack up the debt ceiling, he's had a dramatically different view before the election and after the election. And I think it's very troubling for Australia. Zed mentioned confidence before. I think it will be difficult for people who watch the Australian economy to have confidence in a Treasurer who can shift so markedly and so wildly between one position and another from day to day.
Well, Seselja, your response to that, and also I suppose, it's this view now that the Audit Commission, Jim doesn't buy it, but the suggestion is that the tougher calls will be taken to the next election, that they won't be done in the short term.
Well, a couple of points. Jim's criticising the fact that we're getting external people to do the review. I think that's quite reasonable. We saw that with things like Ghana coming in on climate change. That's not uncommon.
But he's criticising the breadth of the representation, that it's just the big end of town.
Well, I think it's appropriate that we look at leading business leaders and economists to do this kind of work. But when we look at the breadth of the Audit Commission, I think the approach of taking major changes to an election is exactly what we should be doing. It's in stark contrast to what we saw with the Labor Party, who promised not to have a carbon tax and then delivered one. If you're going to make changes, Jim, you've got to take them to an election. Labor Party specifically ruled out a carbon tax. Ruled out a carbon tax, and they and they delivered it, having specifically ruled it out. So Tony Abbott will take a different approach. The coalition will take a different approach. Methodically, we'll go through the finances, we will look to fix the budget, and then if there are major changes that haven't been promised before this election, no doubt some of those will be taken to the next election and the people can deliver their verdict.
I want to get your thoughts quickly, gents. A couple of minutes left, but Jim Chalmers, your thoughts on this climate change debate, which is simmering away as firefighters are still battling the blazes around New South Wales?
I saw Al Gore's comments overnight. He's a person of real standing in the scientific community and the global conversation about these matters, and he's reflecting what is a widespread view amongst scientists about the link between climate change and more extreme weather. But having said that, I'm one of those people who feel a little bit uncomfortable having that sort of policy conversation or political debate while the fires are still raging. I think there's a time and a place for that conversation. It's probably not right now.
Seselja, I assume you agree with Jim on that final point, but Tony Abbott saying that the UN official who made comments this week was talking through her hat that this is a function of not a function of climate change, but a function of life in Australia.
Well, Tony Abbott's 100% right, and I think the UN official even acknowledged that there hasn't been an established link between climate change and bushfires. But let's be clear as well on specific bushfires. I agree to be having this conversation now is insensitive at best, but we do get this often. When the Brisbane floods were there, we were told by the Greens that was as a result of climate change. I think it's unhelpful, and I think that it has been a fact of life. And when the dust settles on this, and when we can have a rational debate, let's look at fuel loads. Let's look at the real issues that go into bushfires and have made bushfires a feature of Australian life, and what we can do better. But let's do that once the fires have passed and once the danger has passed to communities.
Seselja and Jim Chalmers, thanks for the chat this morning, gents. Appreciate it.
Thanks very much.